Welcome to the second session of another very intense day, the third one. How is everybody feeling? Woo! Has the conference delivered on your expectations so far? More than? Yeah? Okay. This makes me happy as I'm also part of the program committee of this conference. My name is Katja. I have a background in science and technology and society, STS, so I was very happy that Bashir mentioned Paul Durisch today in the session before. And today I'm here in my role as senior scientist at the Center for Social Innovation here in Vienna. Hello to all of my colleagues here in the room. A non-profit social research center, this year celebrating 30 successful years of operation. And at ZSI, we define social innovation very broadly, but maybe also very differently to what we have heard before. But let's stay on a broad level for now. So we would define social innovation as novel practices that tackle societal issues and are adopted and successfully used. And at ZSI, we also work, besides many other things, with and develop new methods like citizen science, maker labs, all of these participatory approaches, living labs, and also participatory evaluation. But now please let me say some words about the title of our session and how it bridges from the session before, of course, where not only social innovation, but also the importance of context and the commons, were mentioned. So reimagining AI through social innovation. I think maybe all of you had a similar experience. Some reactions to the last 2 days of the conference that I got were like, oh, it's tough, it's depressing, it's so paralyzing, there is so much structural inequalities, billions of dollars, total domination across all stacks, horizontal and vertical. What can we do? We can do nothing, and so on. But with this session here, we want again to look beyond, take on our pluralistic glasses, to cite you, Gabriella, from yesterday, and step out of doom into the light. High promises. We will not only discuss alternative visions for innovation, we will also really showcase examples of best practices of responsible, highly interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary action. We have a wonderful group of speakers, which will gather here soon on stage, all of you working on actively since many years, that's also important to say, creating AI responsible for actual needs, studying but also integrating digital tech in public administration, and organizing participatory governance across multiple scales. And this is also important because also already on the first day we heard that it's important not to buy too much into the fetishized narratives of big tech, right? And look beyond these important, but nevertheless very US-dominated narratives, which we heard yesterday, is also not helping very much the many different voices that are also present in the US, that are trying right now to fight the situation, that are trying to build new types of organizations, initiatives, infrastructures that are not heard here because everybody looks at the dominant narratives. And also, we will, by buying too much into these dominant narratives, we also help to foster this idea of digital fascism that is around for now quite some time, actually, and that is now becoming more and more visible. So, we today take on the challenge to not only theorize, not only explain, but moving to action. Disruption, this sounds like action, no? It's like an action word. But innovation today is often framed as disruptive. But we need to ask, what is actually being disrupted? And I think in the last days, in several sessions, this question also popped up, but we want to make it even stronger today. Is the status quo really challenged? Who profits? With AI at the center of today's totally hyped innovation narratives and value elicitations, the disruption narrative we see does not at all focus on solving social problems. Instead, it's focusing on making fear talking about risks and all these things. I'm not saying it's not important, but this is a very strong narrative in itself that is framing a lot of the discussion. So it's not focusing on the benefits of societies, but it is basically focusing on what we see, concentrating power, deepening inequality, and accelerating environmental harm. AI currently demonstrates that the innovation lies definitely not in developing what we actually need, but what generate profits, because it locks us into several services. And think about OpenAI and all the others now trying to compete to create the next social media thing, right? So this panel invites us to rethink, reimagine innovation, not as a race for the next big thing, not focused on monetary profits and the billions, but as a political and social question. What kind of innovation do we need for democratic and inclusive futures? And how can digital transformation, and in particular AI, be part of that? And for that, we have gathered a wonderful group of speakers that help us now to explore how this can actually happen and how even with AI, something like social innovation and benefit for the people can actually happen. And all our speakers will showcase for you best practices that are already happening out there. So I will briefly now introduce the speakers and then first ask Gabriella on stage. But first I will always introduce you before you start speaking, because the idea is that the speakers give a short lightning talk, about 15 minutes each, and then we have time for 1 or 2 clarification questions. But after the 3 talks, we gather here on stage and have a discussion which will be opened to you, the audience. So I will now introduce to you Gabriella Waters. I'm very happy that you are here. Besides many other things, you lead the Neurodiversity Lab at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, in the US. You are a machine learning researcher studying the intersections between human neurobiology and learning, integrating ethics and integrating ethics and equity in ML systems, neurosymbolic architectures, and intelligent systems that make use of those foundations for improved human-computer synergy. You develop technology innovations with an emphasis on support for neurodiverse populations. So please, Gabriella, help me to welcome Gabriella on stage. The stage is yours.
All right, thank you. How's everyone? The post-coffee? Okay, the coffee wasn't working. Okay, so my name is Gabriella. I'm really excited to be here this morning, and I am going to talk briefly about AI and social innovation. But first, I want to kind of piggyback on one thing that was said, is how risk is this scary thing. And for me in my research, there's always a risk of a benefit emerging. And who benefits from taking that risk? And so a lot of what I do is about looking for the risk of a benefit and not for the risk of a negative. So I want us to disentangle risk as a negative connotation, because something good could happen, something not good could happen, but if you don't do anything, nothing happens. So we want to make sure we are framing this in the appropriate way, just like we do with bias. Not all bias is bad. So let's get right into it. Neurodiversity as a framework for innovation. The reason that I'm excited about the work that I do is because different kinds of cognition, different kinds of processing can inform how AI models work. It makes them more sensitive to edge cases. It allows them to sort of have different logic propositions, how it reasons, how we get to the kinds of outputs that we do, how it identifies pattern. Neurodiversity is a natural variation in human cognition, and it's a natural variation in information processing. So when I say this, I'm going to stand on my cognitive science, psychology, human-centered computing side, where we talk about the organic neural networks that we are endowed with at birth. And difference in learning and cognition includes things like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADD, or dyslexia, or dysgraphia, dyscalculia, autism, aphasia, synesthesia, you name it. All of these fun and exciting, underexplored areas in terms of marrying them with AI and providing innovative and new services or supports or tools for people who actually would need those. So all of those things on this side sort of diverge from what we consider as typical. So the term is usually neurotypical, and that just means what the prevailing, if anyone has ever studied genetics, I love you, thank you. So in genetics, that's the wild type. It's what you see most often. Anyone in chemistry? What's wrong with chemistry? Wow. Okay. I've never had people who were not familiar with, well, you're familiar with chemistry. Okay. We may continue. So think about, in chemistry, you have a reaction yield, right? And so what happens with the reaction yield? All of that stuff happens in a controlled scenario where you have pure ingredients, you have people who are trained to use those ingredients and put them together and things will happen. So when you put a model in front of a person who has a different cognition pattern or a different way of doing things, you're outside the lab. Anything can happen. And people with different cognitive patterns use these tools differently. They have different needs. But what's happening, I'm going to step over here on my computer science side, my information systems training will kick in. People are messy. We don't like it. Then I'm going to step back on my HCC side. We love it. Because that variety gives us more rich data in order to tune these models so that they're more sensitive. Back on this side. That's called entropy. Back on this side. Isn't it cool? So what we're trying to do is eliminate this tension between these two sides where you have an architecture that's designed to provide certain kinds of outputs, and you have a population that processes information differently so that those outputs don't necessarily make sense. They're not necessarily valid. There's no utility. There's no methodology for improving the model because everything over here doesn't talk to everything over here. And so what we get is this disconnect. They are disparate. And so a lot of the work that I do is trying to take all of this and use it to improve the AI. And so what happens is that people who process differently have different pattern recognition. They have different ways of analyzing information and making sense of the world around them. Over here on this side, we have sensors. 5 of them, usually. We hope. Most people have 5 of them. Some of people don't. But we're sensing about our environment. On this side, the same thing's happening, they're just digital. And what we want to do is use these two to inform each other. Sometimes I'm doing that because I want the AI to be an assistive technology. Sometimes I'm doing that because someone had a stroke. And I want to know if I can model that and then stimulate the neuroplasticity in order to regain what was lost. But we don't take a person with a stroke and actually work on their brain manually. So we build a digital twin on this side, we give it a stroke, and then we see how it finds its way back to those skills. What we learn over here, we take over here. And now, we start to think, okay, we can make new pathways if we stimulate in this way. So sometimes the AI is a medical intervention, it supports that, sometimes it's an assistive technology, but all of those things, those different patterns in cognition, because that's what neurodiversity is, all of that can inform how we train and use and leverage these models. There's a risk of a benefit emerging every time. So what is my current focus? Ambient intelligence. If you have autism and you were to come and sit down in front of your computer, I am designing systems so that it would automatically adjust to your needs. That's what ambient is. It's happening in the background. It's not something you have to focus on. There's a paper called Tangible Bits that kind of feeds into that. When I heard about Durish, I smiled immediately because I have a long list of favorite papers, and his is among them. So I was really excited to hear that. But we are looking at how we can make things that happen sort of naturally. You walk into a room, the lights were off, the lights come on. That's ambient technology. You walk into a place, the doors open automatically, that's ambient technology. So if you sat down and a system has been trained on you individually, so when you sit down in front of your workstation, the color contrast adjusts, the brightness adjusts, the menu reorganizes based on what you need. That's what we're looking to build. Mixed reality environments. We are loving the virtual reality, augmented reality potential to leverage the tech on this side so that, let's say, one of the projects is, let's say you have someone who's delayed in their ability for toileting, and you overlay into their environment using mixed reality, sort of like classical conditioning prompts. So let's say they like Dora the Explorer. So every time they come into a room and they start to move toward the toilet, Dora goes, "Yay!" That happens as part of the training. We're using a lasso net regression for that. And we're using a lasso neural network with some LSTEM for the time series, all of that fun stuff, so that every time they get close to the goal, they're rewarded every step of the way. But there's a term we're all concerned about, over-reliance, right? So we ramp them up until they make it to the goal, and then we wean them off so they don't need to have that reinforcement every time. So in my lab, that interdisciplinary work happens automatically because I have psychometricians, psychologists, software engineers, machine learning experts, all of these people working together so that we don't miss the edges. But you know what's the most important? That next bullet. The community is telling us what they need. We're not assuming. They're part of the process. They're part of the training. They can opt in and they can opt out. So part of the missing factor is how we get the social into the innovation, and that's what we focus on. So we don't go out saying, "Oh, this is what you need." We go in with the ears on and the mouth closed. It's hard for researchers, I know. Because we want to do great things, but are the things that we think are great to the society? So we have to get those voices in. Public service systems, educational supports, all of these things are part of what we're working on currently. How do we integrate AI through K through 12 in terms of education? Because you need to have exposure early and often, and you need to have it for every style of learning. So that you're not waiting until you're in college to learn about these things. You're always learning about them. So that's feed on both sides. The HCC and the Information Systems and Computer Service. Public service systems are also important. So a lot of public policy, a lot of work with the judiciary in the United States, a lot of work with the legislature, a lot of work with overall affiliate agencies altogether. So, what are the implications for digital humanism when we think about this? For my work, you heard the word pluralism. I'm not trying to make systems that are great for every single person in the world. I want to make a system that's great for you. I want one that's great for you, because you have separate needs from each other. And it's okay for me to make systems that work for you. The example I used yesterday was, is absolutely fine that a system that works really well in Estonia doesn't work really well in Brazil. Two different cultures. Why are we trying to generalize everything? And so part of that big flattening is that we squeeze out all the context, because there are certain practices and things that are vital for the functioning of these systems that have to be bespoke to the individual, to the country, to the region, to those needs. Cognitive liberty and autonomy. I am a big, big proponent of looking at our cognitive security. Part of this is that when you are training these models on social media and through your interactions through the web, you are lending your individual mental fingerprint to their training. And then that's bundled up and sold back to you. We have to talk through what that means in terms of your cognitive liberty. The fact that you own your own mental uniqueness. And how do we take care of that and secure it? How do we expand the definition of intelligence? And I kind of laugh when I say that, because currently we seem to be like shrinking away from what intelligence is. And I feel like we need to expand it, because there are a lot of people who have been deemed unintelligent just because they're not verbal. But they have lots of intelligence. We just haven't cracked the code for how we communicate with them. And so we need to expand what intelligence really means. It does not include what we call AI. AI is not smart. It's really not. It's so bad. It's embarrassing. So let's not artificially inflate, no pun intended, what these systems can do. We want to amplify the diverse human potential. That's our superpower, that we all have these different ways of approaching things, and that we need to make space for that. So that means we have to have these inclusive digital futures. That means everybody's at the table. So a lot of these conversations we've had where it's been really like, oh my gosh, we're never going to make it, has been because we don't have enough chairs at the table. We have a small table, and then there's another small table. And my whole goal in life is to make long tables. And then we can just keep sliding chairs in, because we can't get to where we need to be if the same voices are always discussing the challenge. So that's where I am going to stop.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Is there a short question for clarification? Otherwise, there will be the opportunity afterwards. So thank you very much, Gabriella.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask now our second speaker on stage, Mirko. Mirko Tobias Schäfer, you are an associate professor of AI, Data and Society at the Department for Information and Computing Sciences and Science lead of the Data School at Utrecht University. For many years also, you have been investigating the transformational impact of digitization, now also artificial intelligence and data practices on the public sphere and in public management. And of course, you have done many other things, so I'm making it rather short. And as you will share, you and your team do this with a highly interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach across the whole socio-technological stack, if you like, focusing a lot on actual impact in administration governance, for example. So please, Mirko, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here at the Digital Humanism Conference. I like to be in Vienna. I studied in Vienna, so this feels like a trip home. Thank you, Gabriella. What you said about going out and listening is really what my team does. We first, in every project, all our projects are with extra university partners. And the first step is to immerse into a sector and to listen to their problems. And then just we start thinking about what is it actually that we could bring to the table. before I start here, I quickly want to also amplify things Gabriella said already. Let's speak about what we are speaking about here, because over the past days there was a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, which is a really problematic term. I mean, it is not intelligent, as you said, but it is an umbrella term that is very convenient if you communicate with larger audiences, or you're a politician or a salesman, or you want to sell something. But it is a range of technologies that can be specified. It could be machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, pattern recognition, you name it. But that would help us to actually demystify the technology that is highly mystified and is creating more problems through this mystification. The other thing is that we have to understand it is a socio-technical construct, and the EU Commission has already adopted this kind of language and calls it also a socio-technical construct, which means that we always have to think the cultural, political, and economic context when addressing technologies that are labeled artificial intelligence. Just a few examples what we are using in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, the public management sector, we work mostly in public management and media industries, is using a wide range of digital technologies that range from more primitive algorithms, decision trees, to more elaborate algorithmic systems. We use it to predict waste management, to channel people who collect waste through different routes where they actually will be able to collect waste. It is used for smart traffic management, so trucks will have a green light, so they go faster through a city and the CO2 emissions are lower. We have AI-powered cameras for identifying cell phone use while driving. The parking management is completely automatized in Dutch cities, so they are not like here in Vienna. You have a workforce of 150 people that are actually controlling whether you paid your parking fees. We don't have that anywhere in the Netherlands. It's completely automatized. It is used for crime prediction, which is of course problematic. It is used for predicting welfare fraud, which is also problematic. It is used for identifying which children will be most likely to leave schools early, also very problematic. So you see it's really sliding into all the range of ethical questions that could be asked when working with these technologies. And the Netherlands are really interesting as a case study, because in the Netherlands we are more a naive, modern people. We think, oh great, there's technology, let's use it, let's make the best of it, we install it. There was even a guy who founded iPad schools because they thought iPads is the most relevant technology on earth and you should train your children on iPads. Disclaimer, it completely failed. But that was a lesser problem. The bigger problem were the real harmful algorithms that were deployed. For instance, the child benefit affair, or the system risk information algorithm that has been prohibited in a law case in the Netherlands. The so-called Rotterdam algorithm, which was an algorithm for identifying possible welfare fraud, or the Nissewaard algorithm, which did the same thing. But one thing is really relevant. The child benefit affair is really touted worldwide as the go-to example for bad use of artificial intelligence. There was no artificial intelligence involved at all. It was a regression analysis, and there were some poor indicators which were never validated. However, the political pressure was so great that civil servants, which even noticed this is harmful what we're doing, could not speak up. So we cannot just blame the technology, it's always the context. And that scandal went on for almost 10 years, and was a huge scandal. Thousands of families were pushed into poverty. There were suicides. Children were taken from families because the families deteriorated into an economic situation where they couldn't uphold a safe family environment, and so on. It went so far that the Ministry of Finance had to found a new department for just restoring the damages that have been caused. So this naive idea of there is some fraud that we need to actually punish fraud and get the money back is now a really costly experiment for the Netherlands, for the taxpayers at all. And the political pressure was so great that there was nothing to be done by the civil servants. So let's think through that for a while. So we have a breakage. An algorithm does something, or the use of the algorithm does something that breaks our social norms and our ethical values. And then you see something that comes up, repair efforts. And I like to study these repair efforts because they have an epistemological value to it. We learn much about the social fabric that is going to emerge when people stumble upon algorithms that do not work. And these are rather tactical initiatives. So you might want to improve the design as you go of the algorithm. You might change indicators, you might change the training data, things like that. Or you terminate the use. You just decide, no, this thing is not using the way I intended it. I just stop using it. Or you compensate for the flaws, which in public management means you have an appeal structure. You have a way of unbureaucratically and fastly to resolve problems that emerge from these non-functioning algorithms. Or you protest against it. So in the Netherlands, we have civil rights organizations protesting against the use of certain algorithms, and they're filing lawsuits successfully. And this also leads to very relevant things, to practices of good conduct and good governance, which are not yet formalized, but in the renewal stage, which is strategic, can be formalized. And this is what the Netherlands are doing now, and this is why this is so fascinating to investigate. The Netherlands are now working hard on developing the checks and balances for a digital society. And that would be like you use general policy frameworks. The top-down strategy is, of course, coming from the European Union. But for everybody in the room, in the Netherlands, we do not consider the AI Act as sufficient. So most municipalities will develop additionally their own regulation because the AI Act is just considered the floor. And according to the ethical awareness of the municipality, there will be local regulation as the ceiling. In some, it might be higher. In others, it might be lower. Then there are mandatory impact assessments. In the Netherlands, you're much more forced to make impact assessments, even if they're not legally binding. There's not a legal mandate yet, but it is an unspoken law. Digital ethical literacy, something that is common in the Netherlands. So since the child benefit affair, the beneficial risk there was that we do not have to explain that anymore to anyone. Even if a politician doesn't want to talk about ethics, finds it vague or unnecessary, they cannot ignore it, because that's now a fact. Elected representatives that might control that understand that AI is not choosing a certain shape of an artifact, but it's actually programming society and has a political edge to it. And actually every party, from the Christian conservatives to the far right, should have their own policy on what they want with AI, what kind of society they want to program with it. Oversight authorities in the Netherlands are really steeping up their capacities and their competences for controlling and developing control. Audits that might be implemented. The fourth estate, really relevant. You need really good tech journalists in a digital society, and only few countries in Europe have it. There would be the UK, there would be Germany. In Austria, we had with Future Zone, and we had really avid technology journalists a while back when the Echelon project was traced by Austrian journalists and so forth. And the Netherlands have really excellent tech journalists. They are vital for such a democracy. I will illustrate that with one example. So the Rotterdam algorithm was big in Wired news. Wired magazine is completely anti-algorithms at the moment, and very uncritically, and they did poor research here as well. So they noticed, the research came from a really good outlet, Lighthouse Reports, and they took this and they came with this easy narrative. Yes, there was this algorithm that was discriminatory against people of color and single mothers, and it was a nightmare. The reporting came 1.5 years too late, because in the meantime, the algorithm had been shut down. Let's quickly focus on what the algorithm was. It was an algorithm developed by Accenture, something the article hardly touches upon. But it would be really interesting to know, was that just a data-savvy intern they had that pulled together an Excel sheet with a regression analysis? Or was there something like knowledge put into it, like validation of indicators, which obviously had not been validated? The effectivity had never been proven. Something had been sold to a public organization, that was it. And the ones who noticed that it wasn't working were the civil servants, who noticed that the target group that was selected as a risk population was not matching the criteria for social benefit for it. So the civil servants stopped the algorithm. Let's look at the timeline here. The algorithm was developed in a time when this child benefit affair had been fully unfolding. So the civil servants were aware of there are pitfalls to algorithms. So they were alerted when they installed the algorithm. They quickly noticed the breakage. They noticed there is discrimination, there are the wrong people selected, so they took a repair effort. Their repair effort was, we stop using the algorithm, and they did the really valuable thing, they alerted their own audit office. So Rotterdam's audit office went into investigating how do we develop algorithmic technology and how do we govern it. And the result was really a scathing report called Colored Technology, because it was racist technology in fact, and led to a number of recommendations that we can call renewal. And these recommendations had been implemented in Rotterdam. Let's look at some of these recommendations. It was creating a position for fundamental rights and algorithms impact assessment and data ethics advisor. Two tools developed by my team. I will speak about them in a minute. A position for an algorithm expert that is advising civil servants. An advisory panel of experts who are reviewing the algorithmic practices of the municipality. A training of digital ethical literacy for the entire workforce. And, of course, publishing the algorithms that are used. Then, after that all had been already implemented, then came the publishing in Wired magazine, so really after the fact. And for the audit office, these implementations did not go far enough, so they published a second report. So they went back and looked, did they actually do what we asked them to do? And there was a second report 2 years ago called Showing Color, where they said, no, you did some steps, but it is not where we want you to see. So they're working on it. Quickly about the instruments. This is our digital data ethics decision aid. It is a process it's a dialogical process where you can deliberate about value-sensitive design. And I will focus on the social innovation here. What our tool does, it brings together people who usually are not in the same room. There might be the older woman in a city board, and she's fighting for implementing this data project. But we put her in a room with a subject expert and the data scientist. And one of the first questions in this dialogue is, do you use an algorithm? And that is an easy question. So the data scientist says, of course, if you call my small model an algorithm, yes, call it an algorithm, there's an algorithm. But the second question is, can someone explain the algorithm? And again, the data scientist says, yeah, of course I can explain my model, it's my model. But I have not the mandate to explain it to anyone. And that's the moment when the older women and a policy advisor wake up and are aware of the fact they have actually to explain that to journalists, to parents, to political parties in the council. And all of a sudden, a dynamic unfolds where they are vested into building better technology, mitigating risks, and constituting accountability. Let's have a quick look at the impact assessment. For the scholars in the room, the interesting part is that if you build such a small thing like the DIDA, you get bigger assignments. This came directly from the national government. And you see we made a social technical impact assessment. We asked first for the motivation. Why are you using an algorithm? Is that necessary? Is that changing anything? And then we look into the black box and ask for what is the model card, what kind of indicators do you have, how are they verified, how do you ensure data quality, etc. pp. And then the how is the governance structure. We want to know what kind of safety features do you have in place? When are you looking at the algorithm? Do you have a change log, an error log? How do you work with complaints and appeals? And last part is a thorough investigation to what extent fundamental rights are affected. Other things in the Netherlands are algorithm registers. I could talk about that. I find them very much flawed. If someone wants to install that in a public management in a sector in Austria, speak to us. You can avoid a lot of mistakes. One word about the panels, because this is really interesting about social innovation. You can have, of course, the ethics washing panel where you give some citizens the name ethics committee, and they don't have support, they don't have training, they don't have a mandate. I serve not on such a panel. I serve on the one that advises the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance, of course, has a burden in the Netherlands. And you see here a meeting of that committee, and the committee is asked is actually tasked by the members, by the working force of the Ministry of Finance to help them with big problems. For instance, can we use chatbots when helping people on the tax information telephone line? And we think about that in a more general way, like an abstract way. What is it changing? What kind of safety features do you need? We make reports out of that, and these reports go to Parliament. And if the minister is not adopting the report, the minister has to explain why he or she is not adopting our recommendations. What I find in terms of social innovation, the most fascinating feature about this committee is you see behind the table where we're sitting a group of people. We call that our second row. And the second row consists of people from the ministry, customs service, the Department for Benefits. Sometimes more than 30 people are sitting there, listening into our conversation and feeding us with relevant information and also pitching new items for the agenda. Last point before I leave this, what I find the most essential part is that AI becomes a res publica, that our politicians are actually aware of the political qualities and are bringing this to the House and debate about it. What kind of society do we want to live in? Because it is not just a choice between the color of the AI, it is a social choice that you make, a political choice. So we need people who are aware of the quality of data and AI, the political quality, and they must be able to engage in informed deliberation, which is at the point really not the case. And that helps us to build the checks and balances. I just thought it was fine to put on the motion that was filed to make our impact assessment mandatory, which was been adopted in a large part. So I stop here. We can take the summary into the discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there maybe one or two very short clarification questions? I think it was...
Otherwise, we take this.
We will take this. I think what you also have showed very beautifully is that how assessment tools can also be tools for empowerment, actually, and are not treated as some kind of, a prediction of the failures that will happen. Instead, will empower the public servants to know, to build knowledge, to create capacity. So I think this was brilliant. Thank you very much for showing this. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Reema Patel. Reema, you are the co-founder of the Ada Lovelace Institute in the UK, and until recently you were also its associate director. For a long term already, or are you still? I'm sorry. You're looking like that. No, it's true. Yeah.
I can explain.
No.
Yes. Carry on.
But I will carry on, and you will then explain about. Sorry, I hope I didn't make a mistake in your CV. For a long time, but I'm sure this is right, you are working at the intersection of public participation policy and technology ethics. You have experience in public policy and have advised a range of organizations on their approaches to public engagement, and particularly as they relate to understanding lived experience, what we have heard in the two prior talks as well, and impacts on underrepresented communities. Later, now actually, you will share insights from the Public Voices of AI project and talk about the potential for participatory multilateralism through initiatives such as the Global Citizens Assembly.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And such a pleasure to be with you today. I'm also really interested to hear about the role of collaboration, coordination in shaping AI, and that's really what my work is about. I have multiple hats. I have a research hat based at the University of Sheffield, as well as working with the Ada Lovelace Institute, the Alan Turing Institute, and UCL on this particular project. Previously, as you've mentioned, I have been really involved in co-founding the Ada Lovelace Institute and setting up the participation unit at the Ada Lovelace Institute. And this project is a really interesting crystallization of all of those different roles I have had. So I'm presenting the findings from this project. The project was funded by Responsible AI UK, which is a strategic investment in the UK from our UK Research Council. So I was asked to be upbeat and optimistic about the future. So obviously this is my first slide. The Oppenheimer moment, I mean, obviously, people will remember this film in terms of the sort of impact of nuclear and Oppenheimer's moment of realization when he realized that actually his development of nuclear technology had the potential to have devastating impact. And of course, AI has huge potential for risk. And when we're asking this question about the role of public voices in shaping AI, this is of course important. But I also want to stress that there are other reasons, not just purely negative reasons or harm-based reasons for why we want to include the public in shaping AI. And one of the key things to really think about is that we're developing technologies to benefit us, ultimately. That's the idea. Technologies have always historically been about human beings and people at the heart and benefiting people. So it shouldn't really be that difficult or challenging to make the case for including public voice in AI, and yet sometimes when I'm in rooms, I do feel like I'm pushing a boulder up a hill, and I find that's quite interesting, really. So why do we want to include public voice in AI? To realize the opportunities of AI for everyone, to secure a social contract for AI so that we all feel that it's the right thing to do, that it works for us, and it is part of that socio-technical system, as has already been described. Also, to recognize that people live life in really different ways, and without really understanding people, we won't really be able to develop technologies that benefit them. So what I've been doing over the past few years in my various roles is making the case for a dialogue model. So there's a sense of AI-critical agency and awareness from across the system, moving away from the sort of experts at the top model to an experts on tap model, noting that people are experts in their own lives and they bring that expertise in shaping AI technology. And on the right-hand side, Sherry Arnstein's a US health policymaker, wrote a defining piece of work on public participation called Ladder of Citizen Participation. It's very much about making it possible to climb the AI participation ladder. So how do we ensure that people move from just being told about AI and how it's affecting them towards actually being able to exercise some critical awareness, agency, and empowerment in shaping AI? And what are the methods and the models that can do that? That's always been something that's deeply interested me. Now, one of the things that we did through this project is we did a review of the evidence of public attitudes in AI, and we found several things. One is that when we're developing models for including people in shaping AI, good evidence can include people who are often overlooked, is sensitive to the needs of diverse groups, can incorporate differences in analysis, can report on inequalities in findings, and can communicate diverse perspectives clearly in recommendation, and can serve the communities that are often less heard or spoken to. The other thing that we did was we conducted an international survey of AI researchers, the people who are actually developing, designing AI technology, people who are conducting research in various AI labs. In fact, we've heard from one of the AI labs today. And the vast majority of AI researchers, it reveals, make assumptions about the public and lack awareness about how to involve the public. So we can see here that there's assumptions that simply understanding of AI means that the public would trust AI more, whereas a lot of the data, public participation data, doesn't actually suggest that. It suggests that there are important decisions and trade-offs to be made, a social conversation to have. So actually, a lot of AI researchers are under the misapprehension that if they just learned, if they were just communicating AI more effectively to the public would be on board. That's not actually the case. The other thing that's really interesting is that it finds that AI researchers find that most people do not understand the potential benefits of AI, and they find also that most people do not, so AI researchers think that most people do not understand the potential risks of AI. So this really is focusing on lack of understanding and lack of awareness rather than the conversation or dialogue about the impact of AI on society. The other thing that this study illustrated was that most AI researchers don't actually have much experience of public participation. So if you look here, involving public in standards setting and regulation, 6% of the 5,000 that we surveyed had actually used the method. And then citizen juries and deliberative processes, 3% had used the method. So there's still a way to go in terms of sort of actually embedding this across the AI ecosystem, which I think is really interesting. So this work was very much about developing framework, methodologies, tools, and workbooks for supporting this ecosystem to include public voices in AI. And you can find this on the Digital Good Network website, on the Ada Lovelace Institute website as well. And so what we've done is we've taken Shirley Arnstein's work, The Ladder of Citizen Participation, set that out into a low power up to high power framework for including public voices in AI, setting out these methodologies, success metrics as effectively being about its ability to shift power structures and asymmetries of power. We know that these are already very stark. So contextualizing these methods in being able to do that is really important. As I mentioned, it's shaped by Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. So she talks about sort of communication and manipulation as being no power, then you've got low power, which might be just telling people about the AI, all the way up to high power, which is active collaboration and devolution of decision-making. So the socio-technical lens is already being mentioned, and the other question that this framework does is it engages with this question of where can people participate across what seems to be a really complex system. So here I'm sort of suggesting an eco-socio-technical lens. So eco recognizing the constraints, the planetary boundaries that we all work and operate within. Socio-technical systems being the society or the social context within which the technologies work or operate. And the technologies as having impact on organizational structures, physical systems, tasks and activities, people and communities and groups, and actually understanding the sort of role of technology as actually operating within a given context and within planetary constraints means that we can understand better where people can participate in shaping AI. Actually, one student came to me yesterday and actually asked me this question, where can people participate in shaping AI? And broadly, I sort of think it's at 3 stages. One is upstream, when we're thinking about the data training the AI. One is midstream, so as AI itself is being developed, can participation help in shaping the development of AI by iterating and progressing and refining and untangling some of the knots that come up in the development process. Also downstream, so we've heard already about AI assurance and impact assessment and rights assessment and all those sorts of things. The key thing is that the life cycle suggests there's an endpoint, but of course AI doesn't end. And so this is sort of simplistically linear, but actually, you can sort of almost imagine upstream, midstream, downstream being used throughout the process. Briefly, the path to participation AI does not run smooth. I've kind of already mentioned this. This is a piece of work that comes from my former colleague, Rowan Conway at the RSA, who illustrates why we don't see uptake of participatory methods. So, that 3%, 6% number, there are actually reasons for that. And it's not just that, AI developers don't want to, it's that all these other things get in the way: competing incentives, market readiness, regulatory framework, worry about media backlash, cultural norms, and procurement, and all of these other things. And I've spoken to many AI developers who express their frustrations about this. But I would say that it's important to think about how we can overcome those barriers, and that's what good systems change is about. So, We've also, in terms of the workbook, so there's a series of tools that I've developed, and literally a self-assessment workbook. If you're thinking about the use of public participation in AI, you can work through this workbook that asks you a set of questions, and you can assess your approach against that workbook. And that's available in a kind of a grid format online as well. But broadly speaking, these are the key themes that it engages with: the values of the engagement, the responsiveness of the process, and the quality of the process. So in terms of the values of the engagement, beneficiary and stakeholder identification, who is actually being involved and why, ethical, religious, and cultural sensitivity, equity, inclusion, and appropriate inclusion mechanisms. So there's no point in involving the right people if you don't actually support them to shape the outcome. The ethics of care and mutuality towards communities and citizens. What do people actually get from shaping the independence and trustworthiness of a process? The quality of a process, so public gallery, accountability, and transparency. Is there enough time, money, support for that inclusion? Commitment to quality assurance and continual impact assessment. So is this one-off actually? Is there a sort of commitment to actually doing this on a long-term basis? Responsiveness of the process, so like who actually has ownership of how to include people here? And what's the role for agenda setting or shaping or no, influencing the direction or trajectory of the inclusion approach? Do we even know what we're involving the public on, and the context and the strategy, actually? Because sometimes I find that that's not that clear. And clarity of purpose and scope, and a commitment to actually do something with the participation process. So that's quite a lot there. But if you would like to find out more about this work, my contact details are there. And if you'd like more resources, I'm more than happy to share that with you. Thank you very much.
Still time for a clarification or a question to Reema directly. Yes, there is one. And there is a second.
So in what I would call the standard model for Western societies, citizens can impact society in one of three ways, right? One is consumers. The other one will be as voters. And the third one would be as participants in civil society. And what you're really saying, that's not enough. But what's unique about AI? I can imagine the same issues I can take many other issues, climate policy. Why are we focusing on public participation just in AI rather than in many other things that I think are equally important?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not sort of saying we should just focus on AI, to be honest. I mean, that's my interest is broader. Anyone looked at my research, I have done work with communities on the future of economic policy, on climate science, on food systems. So I agree. I think AI, it's a good lens into some of these other issues. So, when I have worked on, so one of the participation exercises that I worked on was a tool to help prioritize the National Health Service waiting list in the UK. And the National Health Service wanted to develop an algorithm to start to use National Health Service data sets in order to understand who should be first in the queue for care, healthcare. Yeah. That's an AI question, but it's also a question of how should we prioritize our healthcare resources. So that's an example. I mean, there have been other similar questions in the pandemic, a lot of algorithms that have been used. A few examples, case studies have been given of home office decision-making. And it's rare that the conversation is just about AI. The conversation is what kind of society do we want to build, and what's the role of technology in building that society?
I would say even more. If you take the slogan, government of the people, for the people, by the people, and what you're really saying, the people are disempowered. And we need to find a way to empower people in this equation.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. So low power to high power, or no power, low power, high power. Yeah.
There's another question. Please keep it short. And in the meanwhile, I would like to ask the other speakers on stage, please.
My question is for all the speakers.
So you are already starting the conversation. Perfect. So
Yes.
please go ahead.
Yeah. So I just, first of all, thank you for the inspiring initiatives that we see here. So my question is, you mentioned a lot about inclusion, civic participation. If you are including Global South perspectives in your initiatives, and how are you including?
So who wants to start giving an answer here?
Go for it. Well, I just answered the last two questions, maybe, and then I can come later.
So in the work that I do, I'm participating on a lot of global task forces and committees. And so the Global South is absolutely an area of focus, but so are other countries that are usually traditionally left out of the conversation on where does the data come from. Is it being processed and cleaned in one country for service in another? You know, what's the lineage of this data, and who's included, who's excluded, who is in the room from all of these different communities, so that there are spaces for improvement in terms of data quality and data governance. So those are definitely areas that still need more, you know, bolstering globally in terms of who gets to be at the table, who gets to decide what quality data is when it's representing a society that's outside of your own, and how is that evaluation being made. And so those are the kinds of conversations we have, and it's easier to have them when you're on a task force that's global versus when you're on a task force that's insulated in your own country. And so I think that's the way forward, and to continue that work, you have to continue these conversations, and you have to be really intentional. Like, what is the actual purpose of the task force? Because you can do a lot of performative things, and it looks really good on paper, but the actual impact, there's no metrology for it. And so we have to make sure that we are doing all of that work. And so to the extent that we do participate in those ways, we have more meaningful, again, ears open, mouth closed. So I don't go onto these task forces going, I know exactly what they need in Argentina. They just need more smaller large language models and chatbots. Like, I don't know that. I don't have that lived experience. So it's about making sure that those people are in the room, and also making sure that you're actually listening to the actual story, so that you can have a measurable impact and not a press opportunity.
Can I jump in here with a question to all of you that is building on your question and on what you have just said? Because all of you, in some form or the other, organize participation. On which scale, it's not so important, but what are you doing there? You're organizing the social kit, right? The social glue that is so important for this kind of complex and really not easy and high effort collaboration, if you like. It's so important to innovate. Without that, it wouldn't work. But what skills and practices are actually needed by involved actors? You mentioned that the researchers, they don't have an education in that. I can say I'm a social scientist. I even don't have an education in that. So what skills and needs do you see? What skills needs do you see here?
I think it's really interesting, because in a way we have to unlearn a lot of the things that we've been taught through our education system, to be able to open up and create spaces to facilitate, enable, and connect. That means not being the expert, realizing that your expertise is playing an enabling role. And so I've seen lots of specialists join participation exercises, and I think some of them sort of say, this is one of the most challenging things I've had to do, but it's also one of the most rewarding things I've had to do, because now I have to explain my concept in such a simple way that anyone can understand it. And actually, that was really hard for me to do. Like, how do I actually do that? Whereas we're kind of rewarded for speaking, you know, our own language and writing and publishing behind paywalls. And so I think there's a kind of skill set of unlearning what you have learned a bit to enable that to take place. and always being open to new methodologies and processes, and then the skill set of interdisciplinarity, that actually recognizing there is space for different forms of expertise. And it's also probably, like I've observed from working with specialists who engage participants, like quite unnerving for them because they don't know what's going to happen at the end of a process. So they've got to sort of, relinquish a sort of attachment to the results of a process and focus on the process rather than
the outcomes.
to the results. But also they're often very surprised by what comes out and value it and benefit from it. I mean, I work with economists as well as scientists and AI developers. And the more I think people can sort of see this as part of their process of developing or refining the technology that they're doing, the better. And the other thing is the big challenge is even if they have the skill, they're not in ecosystems or environments that reward them for taking time to develop something that is good, which is hard.
Yeah, that's very hard.
Yeah.
So you touched already upon a lot of aspects of it. Mirko, how is your experience in organizing the social fabric?
So we also had to learn everything by ourselves. There was absolutely no education, and I have to say the university is not the best host for the activities that we are carrying out. So we built a complete parallel infrastructure to being able to do this. One of the most important things that I taught my team was suspended judgment. We refer here to Marshall McLuhan, but it has very much to do with mouth shut, ears open. But also that if you immediately react to something, so we work also with the police forces and other organizations where my team sometimes has sensibilities that might kick in too early. And then you would end in conversation before you can actually effectively intervene. It's very important to keep that line of communication open and actually position yourself within the decision curve. And that requires some skills that we try to train. How can we enter these spaces? The other thing that I find really relevant in our work is when we develop a tool, it's not just for the tool. Like the things I showed, it's not just they have to work, and we don't want to feed all this cemetery of prototypes that you have in academia. So that was new, that if something has to be useful, you get into a production and optimization process until you really can release it. But these tools also have to serve a second objective, namely to deliver us more data. We need them as means for participatory observation. So we have this land and expand strategy. We come with a small problem and we listen and we find more ways to engage and interact.
Dual use.
Yes, these are dual use contexts.
Gabriella, how are you organizing this also within your highly interdisciplinary team, this uncertainty also that you work with?
So it's a little bit easier for us because at Morgan, we have a program called Morgan Cares, where it's actually not located on campus. It's in the community. Mm-hmm. And so what happens with Morgan Cares is people from the community have issues or concerns, but they don't have the ability to conduct research. So they come to Morgan Cares and they say, you know, we're having this challenge and we could use some funding, and our researchers turn that into a request where they get a grant. And so the community is the expert. Mm-hmm. But our researchers know how to frame the research so that there is an outcome for the funder. Mm. And so what happens is the community is basically leading what is needing to happen, and then the research is crafted around it. Mm. And so that model sort of extends a lot throughout our university. Mm. And it literally requires, as Mirko said, it can't happen within the college. You need to have a presence within the community so that that feels like a natural extension. But it's, again, not a thing that's cultivated. Yeah. You think about a therapist, like they are trained to listen to all of these kinds of challenges. Researchers aren't trained in that way. And so it's almost antithetical that you would have the community coming to you telling you. It's more, you're trained more to say, I'm the expert, this is what we need to do. But your role is to support. So, you know, you think about the downstream, the upstream, the midstream, all of these different places. As a researcher, you're inserting wherever the community is telling you your value is, instead of it being the opposite. So for us, it's different. So that carries out through my lab as well, because I may have a really interesting idea that I think is interesting. The psychometrician is like, I can't evaluate for that. So it's not really that interesting. And the actual community of people with neurodiversity, I'm like, I don't even care about that. So it's like, okay, my feelings are a little hurt, but it's not about my feelings, you know? So it's really about unpacking what your goal is overall when you're saying participation, when you're saying community. Is it only when you're the conductor, or can you be the third violin?
Or can you be all, but in different times?
At different times, you're the
Yeah.
concert master, and sometimes
Yeah.
you're the conductor, and sometimes
Yeah.
you're on timpani, and sometimes you're on that one time where they bring out the guitar, the electric guitar, you know? And so you think about how the orchestra is set up, and you have your woodwinds here behind you, and you have your strings over here, and then you have your cellists and your bassists over here. And if you don't know how the orchestra is set up, and that sounds very foreign to you, my apologies, but there are sections that are standard for where the musicians sit. And sometimes for you to hear, you may actually have to move from where you are. And that's the analogy that I'm trying to draw. Sometimes it means that, you know, when the concertmaster is rehearsing the orchestra, he doesn't stay in one place.
Yeah. But that
And-
needs a certain culture, right?
Right.
And that needs safe spaces and ethics of care that were mentioned as well. So that we can, in our, you know, outside of the university labs. By the way, there was this concept of science shops, if some people can still remember it, which had a very similar function as you were describing. So we need this kind of academic culture that allows for these kind of interactions, I think. I see already 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you still want to respond, or should we start taking the questions?
Let's take questions. Let's speak to the
So
audience.
Astrid was the first hand that I saw. First hand. I saw you first, but yeah, now you decide.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you for your fantastic presentations. Let me stand. So I have a question to Gabriella and Marka, kind of from the side of the computer science, turning to the society. And it is about assessment, but not assessment in general, but assessment as a technical stage of software development. So if we put it very simple, in traditional software development, there are 2 very important things, like making kind of a golden standard, so what is the right answer to this question, and having high assessors agreement, like many assessors are thinking the same thing. And so the question to Gabriella is how to make this golden standard when you tune your systems very individually, and how can you understand about what is the golden standard for for non-neurotypical person. And the question for Mark would be actually about this assessors agreement. And since you work a lot of technologies who influence some policy decisions, so what if you come to some agreement and you align this technology with your agreement, and then, for example, another political party comes to power in a very democratic elections, but they have totally other views on car parking, on migration policy, whatever. And so actually this is kind of assessor disagreement, which we have here. Thank you.
You want to start?
Who wants to react?
So in terms of assessing, the thing that I like to explain is that you are continuously assessing. And so it's not a thing that happens at the end. It's an iteration. It's a part of that refining of the process, that you're continuously assessing whether or not there's utility, there's validity, there's usability, all of these things. And so there is not a point at the end where you go, okay, I'm giving myself a score as a result of this particular assessment. Every single step of the process is an opportunity for refining, especially when you're doing something individually for an individual user. And so there isn't a set threshold where I would say, okay, once I hit 7.5, then we're good to go. What happens is there's this bi-directional conversation that we're having with the users and ourselves as the developers, so that when the user starts to find the utility, and you can tell that whether they're verbal or not, when they start to find that utility, that's when you know that you're on the right track, and then you keep going. But if I need to set up a sort of normalization for where we start, and then where we end up, then I literally will do that for the situation. So I have a lot of insane math in the background for each one of these, because what is a normalization for someone with hyperlexia versus someone with dyslexia is going to be very different. And so you take that into account, but once you set up that equation once, then you have it from then on. So I'm not afraid to do all of that extra work, because what it means is that the utility is going to be there at the end of the day.
I can be rather brief. It's an important observation you make, and it will be the future that city councils, politicians, a house that is voted in new, they have to review not only the legislation of the predecessors, but also the programming that has been done. So we have to look into digital twins, what kind of measurements have been applied, do we have higher values than the standards prescribe, or lower, because we want it to be a greener city or a less greener city, whatever. So they need to learn how to read code, or ask people who can, and they will have to review that. It's just become part of the political fabric is now in code, in programming code, not only in legislation.
That's also important, that it is somehow open or transparent to look into, right?
Yeah.
Reema, you also want to respond to this, or should we take the next question?
I think take the next one.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
fine.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, thanks for all your great presentations. I have a quick question. How do you engage the citizens? So from my own experience, it's very hard to get a diverse group of people and not only reach those that are interested already or well educated or have the time. So if you think about the childcare benefit scandal, those are the most vulnerable groups in society. So how could they find time to participate? I guess, Gabriella, you already mentioned being present in communities would be one way, but what other ways are there to reach a broader audience?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different methodologies or approaches to engaging or involving citizens. I mean, we've mentioned a few of them: citizen assembly, citizen jury, actually just simple focus groups that are lasting for a longer period of time than usual. They don't all have to be very extensive. Depending on the issue, they can be much lighter touch. I also think that we really overlook connecting with communities where they might already be, and working and collaborating with them through, I mean, some people use methods such as ethnography, digital ethnography as well, so engaging in digital spaces and in physical spaces like libraries or community centres or cafes, great ways to engage citizens, and it really, actually, I would sort of do an assessment of like locality, place, area, the needs of the communities, and then design the method based on that. I think that kind of community and person-centric approach is the best approach. I often see a tension, though, between people who have the power to do the engagement and what the best approach is. And so I find it's often you need to negotiate that trade-off. So often policymakers or regulators or developers are quite, cautious about opening up their processes. So that's obviously the sort of practical challenge. Is in an ideal world, you would want it to be completely agenda setting bottom up, but then you are at risk of sacrificing the ability of the engagement to influence change and have impact. So it's a careful balance.
And the people that run through the process of being participants, because
Yeah.
you don't start as a participant
Exactly.
immediately, they are in many cases already quite empowered.
Yeah,
So
and
they can be
the job
dangerous.
is so tricky in a way, because you don't want it to turn into this sort of extractive approach,
Yeah.
where it's just the so you have to. It's a bit of a fine balance to strike.
Yeah,
I
Nico,
refer
you
to
also
that as
wanna add
research
something?
tourism.
Yeah.
I can quickly add to that. I mean, these structures have been formalized nowadays. So in the Netherlands, we have these citizen councils. People are selected according to statistical criteria, and they're paid for their time to be there. We have citizen council on climate change. We have a citizens dialogue on social media and public disorder. We have citizen councils on fireworks, very controversial topic in the Netherlands. So there are many, and there are also companies that specialize in providing the entire support that is necessary for that. Yes, for the fireworks, absolutely.
Yeah. I hope it is okay for you, because we started late, because the last session ended late, that we a bit overdo our time. And there was a question here, I think from you. Yeah, you raised your hand?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question to Mirko about the Dutch, because I'm from the Netherlands, the Dutch child welfare scandal. So one of my students, she studied the problem. She was from computer science, a bachelor student, and she took that as her thesis. She looked at all the information. There was a lot written about this, and then she looked at: is it easy to find out what has really happened? And she made a process model, a very simple one, to understand what was actually the process in that, what went wrong. And then we looked at this algorithm register that you mentioned to see, because the Netherlands promised that they give information about the algorithms that are used. We didn't find it, and we didn't find anything that was useful. For her, it was a nice assignment, but we were like shocked that there was not a simple explanation of what really happened, although this is such a big scandal and everybody is interested in it. So what we thought is really these systems are being implemented actually without being tested. There may be, like communities involved, but it's really like it's being outsourced to Accenture or whatever company, and it's being implemented. We don't fly in airplanes that are not being tested. Why is this actually still the case, and probably still recently happening all the time, maybe also in other countries?
Yeah, firstly, I think that observation is absolutely correct. And for the non-Dutch people here, it is really such a big thing in the Netherlands. There's even a TV show now, and a drama show on the toeslagenaffaire, the child benefit scandal. So I think it happened in a sphere of when the big data hype came around, and there was this idea, they called it the broedkamer, an engine room where young people were allowed to play with data without any oversight, and there was no thinking in advance what could happen. That was the start. And for everybody in the room, everybody who was involved in this broedkamer is fired. So they laid off all these people who had their hands near this thing, righteously so. So I think it was underestimated. It was not valued. AI is also, there was the question of the gentleman, why do we think about citizen dialogues on AI and not on more urgent things? I think politicians think AI is not that urgent, so we can give it to citizens to speak about. It's harmless. So it's underestimated what it actually can do. It's seen as like an IT issue. Yeah? It's just an information technology issue, not a social issue. So it has been underestimated. It's very complex. And I have to say, one problem is also the data scientists and computer scientists being involved. And I'm in a computer science department, that they really think they can say something about society. So I call that intellectual trespassing, which happens a lot in computer science these days. We allow people to design something for things they do not understand, and they think they understand them. And then I think thinking about that something can malfunction is just not really a presence in the data science and computer science scene. You test it somewhere, and every algorithm does something. There's always a result. So companies take that also for their advantage. Why would you inspect your algorithm to the fact that you cannot sell it anymore? It does something. So it really takes a lot of skills to understand what does it wrong. So, and I think this is also bad news. Everybody who's installing algorithms thinking I can cut costs, you also need to hire some smart people who can look at the algorithm.
Yeah. Otherwise, you have to install a own department to clean up the waste.
Yes.
Right? In sake of time, I ask you, short questions, please, short answers. We still have 3 questions. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for the brilliant panel, all of you, and thank you for Katja. But the question is to Mirko, and it builds up on much of what was being discussed regarding the child care scandal. And maybe in sake of time, what I would like to know is not only how to engage citizens better. What I found really impressive in your statements and descriptions was after this break, the renewal phase that you installed really involved the public administration, the policymakers, and maybe just to point us towards what is it, publications you have maybe on how to really bring them to the stage, which you also cited that they even regard the EU AI Act as low or minimum standard and aim for higher standards, something which is very different from our situation here.
Yeah. So firstly, I think that the question came from the civil servants themselves. Civil servants are stuck between angry citizens and volatile politics. And they have to enforce the legislation. So they want to just apply the rules to everybody in the same way. Explain the rules, apply the rules. That's the task of the bureaucracy. So all the tools that we developed gave them actually leverage. They made values explicit where the political leaders thought it is a neutral technology. And the civil servants also said, we are not mandated with making these decisions. These are political decisions. And they also called us in to give privatissimum for the top leadership, because they wanted us to inform the top leadership, the political leadership, about the political qualities. This is how we engage them. We did much less in engaging citizens directly, because we work with experts in that field, but we always get domain experts on the table. That said, just 2 weeks ago, I was in my first citizen council ever to speak about social media, but then I was just called in as one of the experts informing the citizenry. I hope. And about the methods, we published a book called Collaborative Research in the Data Fight Society, Methods and Practices for Investigation and
We will
Intervention.
put it on the website. We'll put the link on the website. Reema also wants to briefly react, I think.
Very quickly. I want to sort of say one of the programs that we've had that came from the response to GM editing of food was, it's a program in the UK called ScienceWise, which nobody has ever heard of, not even in the UK, but the policymakers have received support from this program in order to undertake public dialogue on science and emerging technology issues for many years, including on AI issue. And in many ways, it's a really interesting model of public engagement and dialogue within government to support capacity building. So there's something like over 100 dialogues that have been run on things like geoengineering, very technical issues, AI development, NHS investment in AI technology, geospatial technology, technologies that involve public investment in R&D. So I think it's, on the right issue, there is definitely a space for involvement of public policymakers in shaping science and tech questions with members of the public. And that's a good example that I always like to give of something that's been going on for many years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of expertise actually we can build on, and a lot of experience also. Jenny, and then Ben for the last question. And then
Thank you so much. I enjoyed all of your talks, and I'm a huge fan of Mirko's and Reema's work for the last year. So thank you for all that you do. It's really remarkable and very hard to push for participatory methods, and I really love what you're doing. 2 questions. One would be bad for society, the other may be bad for our companies. And it kind of was mentioned, but what about fatigue, like decision fatigue after a certain time? Is there something, do you notice that, do you see that, or do you fear that there might be an over-asking of people, or the danger even of putting question onto them they shouldn't really answer, but regulators should? And the other one, what if people in the end decide we don't want AI and start to refuse? Are there opting out methods, or would this be actually something that will get a problem for governments?
Yeah, and also this is related to the question, what mandate do these processes that you're involved in have?
Do we collect questions, or shall we?
We are running out of time, but I think it's easier to shortly answer this because it's, again, a big question, but try to be short, and then we did the last.
So on the mandate, I think figuring that out really quickly is very important, and that's why it's in that workbook as like who has ownership of this and what aspect of it do they have ownership? Because if you're a bottom-up civic society organisation and you want to use citizen engagement to make pressure for change to happen, that's completely different to I'm a developer and I want to understand and work with the public to shape my tool and technology, and they kind of have different implications. They're coming from different standpoints. There are different risks associated with both.
Yeah, the fatigue is definitely an issue, and you see that in the backpedaling of the Commission at the moment with trying to limit the AI Act, shelving the AI Liabilities Directive, etc. We see that for the fundamental rights and the algorithms impact assessment, the next question was, do we have a pre-screening of it so that we can decide, do we need it at all? Makes sense, but we see that it is real a burden to ask to invest 5 hours to reflect on a process. But in the long run, if you look at the child benefit affair, it would have been so much cheaper to do that, and this counts for many things. About your question about whether we decide to have AI or not, I think this is really the political agenda of the day, to say we divert from what China does and what the US does, and we build AI on European values, which also means questioning who profits from it. Why should we sacrifice people and planet for the profit of a very few? And that discussion is something that I do not hear. I just see politicians that are eager and anxious to lose or win an AI race without asking who's benefiting from it actually.
And I think if you want to talk about decision fatigue, we should collaborate, because my population gets that extremely. And there are a variety of tactics and techniques that you can use to sort of avoid and mitigate that.
So for the last question, I would like to ask Ben. Do you have the microphone? Yeah, great.
I have the microphone, thanks. Ben Wagner, ITU Austria and TU Delft. So I really appreciate the way you describe the way you do research, and I find it really interesting. I've seen many similar groups working in these areas, and sooner or later I always find you encounter challenges around, let's say, being too close to politics and sort of questions of legitimacy and power being asked. And so I'd be interested if you could reflect from the vantage points of sort of academic institutions or sort of close to academic institutions, whether you've encountered that and how you deal with that when it's sort of, you're basically being challenged to be too political or too engaged in policy making or too friendly to certain groups in society as opposed to others.
Thank you so much for this question that always comes up about being either a researcher or an activist. We had that yesterday as well in the session with the students, and how to strike a balance here.
Shall I start?
How to balance the risk?
Or how not to be labeled as too political or too normative or whatever it's called.
I mean, I worry about the sort of utilitarian balancing question. I mean, I think that there is a sort of question about the balancing, but then there's also a question of disproportionate impacts and where the red lines are. Like, actually, even if it's a small group of people who are really disproportionately impacted and their fundamental rights are infringed upon, then that might still be a challenging question. So there's a kind of, yes, there's a balancing conversation, but I often feel the conversation about AI is very focused on the balancing conversation and doesn't really take into account some of the very stark harms that can be caused. And you know, there are benefits, but sometimes are the benefits worth it? That's an important question. So, you know, what's worth it here?
Yeah. Proportionality also.
I think it's a really central aspect to what universities are going through in the coming years. Universities have been doing a really bad job so far in positioning themselves within societies. They have to go through this, what I call the societal turn, otherwise they will be rendered, will be marginalized. We see that very fast happening in the US now, and we need the societal turn to preserve our pure scientists so they can actually do the work. So we need to shift towards society, especially for responding to urgent challenges like climate change, demographic change, digitalization, warfare, pandemic, etc. But it means that we have to think about rules of engagement. My university hasn't been of any help in that because they thought you just do research, as if the research would be something taking place in a vacuum. So for us, a big help was Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies, to decide with whom to collaborate and with whom not. Also a book called The Honest Broker. That's why I say we are not activist researchers, we're action researchers. I really do not want to bring my personal agenda to the research. So we try to present a range of policy options, and we are not the ones who actually make the policy. And we often usually refrain from engaging in this.
Can I give the last word to Gabriella? But before that, we need to say goodbye to Reema because you have to catch your plane.
Yes.
So goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'll follow up with you soon. Thank you.
So I would say it's a little different for me and being in the United States and being at an HBCU, because our existence is political. And so everything that we do is political, whether we want it to be or not. So we're never disentangled from having a political position. I think that the key is to, it's not even to balance it, because there's going to be times where you need to be very much involved in that side of things, and there's going to be times where you really need to pull back and be that advocate for the community that you're representing. So it's really about getting the experience on, like Mirko said, your universities aren't going to be able to prepare you for this, because this is not a landscape that you can really sort of educate. This is kind of a apprenticeship that you have to sort of go through with someone who's gone through it before you and start to learn how to navigate what that means. So it's really about understanding when to push more in one direction versus the other. It's a pendulum, so it's going to continuously swing. It's in perpetual motion. And just being discerning about when is the appropriate time for you to swing in this direction, and when is it the appropriate time for you to swing back.
So thank you very much for this great conversation, for your presentations, for being here, for enriching, I think, the whole conceptualization of digital humanism also with your positions. And I think we are now ready to go off to lunch. Thank you very much also to the audience.
Thank you.